Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Pat O'Leary. I'm a gameplay engineer at Maxis Studios. My pronouns are he, they, and I'm a white male in his late 30s with a wickedly long goatee. And my talk is called Tourette's IRL because I have found that there's a pretty big gap between the actual real life lived experience of people like me with Tourette's and the notions that people have in their heads about what it's like to live with it and the representations that show up in the media that we create. And so I wanted to take these 15 minutes that Ian generously gave me. Actually, he threw at me last year to hopefully dispel a few of these notions that people have. I also wanted to talk a bit about what it's like to actually work with people like me, as well as and how to make working like me with people like me a little better, as well as talk a little bit about what Tourette's has been, how Tourette's has been portrayed in the media, and how we as creators of worlds could do it a little better. So again, hi, I'm Pat O'Leary. I have Tourette's. I was diagnosed at the age of about 22, but that hasn't stopped me from having a career in games. I was actually working in games at the time, and really the snowball that led me here was the fact that I came into this diagnosis and I realized there was not really a whole lot of educational material available for people like me. Tourette's it still is kind of seen as mostly a thing that kids have and they tend to grow out of. But for people like me whose symptoms persisted into adulthood, I was left kind of scrambling. I had to figure out how to message the things that my body was doing to my workmates so that we could all work together and make awesome worlds. And so as a result of that, I rabble roused directly with the TAA, who's the Tourette Association of America, and they gave me the opportunity to start to write some tips based on my own lived experience. And at first, they published them on their website, and then they flew me out to New York to put me on a CDC funded PSA that I'll link to later. It's up on YouTube. It's just 5 simple tips for making the workplace a little bit better for people with Tourette's. And yeah, my main goal here is that last point is to strive to create a world where people like me can unapologetically occupy public space. Because people like me grew up hiding and masking. That's why it took me until I was 22 to actually get a diagnosis, because I was really good at sensing what was coming on, seeing the reaction of people around me, and linking those things up and figuring out how to hide it until I realized I couldn't anymore and needed to start to do this sort of stuff. So again, thank you very much to Ian and all of you for sitting here and listening to me. So let's go in and define what Tourette's actually is, because again, people have their own ideas of what it is. And I want to get to the nitty gritty, unfortunate medical diagnosis. Tics are sudden involuntary muscle contractions. And Tourette's is a tic disorder, which means for you to have the diagnosis of Tourette's, you need to have at least 2 motor and 2 vocal tics that last for more than a year. And the first tic needs to come before the age of 18. And so a verbal tic is anything that traditionally produces speech, muscles from the diaphragm all the way up to the lips, including tongue clicking, that kind of thing, which I get going on at sometimes. And motor tics are everything else. And that's important because when you have both, it kind of indicates that there's maybe a little bit more going on, that there might be some co-occurring conditions like OCD and ADHD. It's all the accessories that come along and the brand recognition. So maybe it's like a Cadillac of tic disorders. Uh, so like I said, all you need are 2 motor and vocal tics, which actually means 1 in 100 people hit the diagnostic threshold at some point in their life. So it's not a totally rare and unheard of condition. It's actually something that you might have met somebody and not even known because either their symptoms are so mild that you wouldn't have noticed, or like me, they try to mask and cover it up. These ticks are also influenced by the environment, both internal stresses as well as things that go on around people. So, sudden visual distractions, loud noises, people reacting directly to your ticks, trying to joke with you, all of those can actually impact the way that ticks are expressed. And my next point is that it tends with an asterisk to reduce with age. That seems to be the case for a lot of people, but for me and a lot of other people, it isn't. And so, what do we do about it? Well, we have to get up and make our own educational material, um, like I'm doing right now. And so, all of that did not touch on the single thing that most people associate with Tourette's. And honestly, it's the thing that a lot of people in my situation would get up here and say, it's okay, I don't have the swearing kind. Well, so let's talk about it. Coprolalia is the medical definition or the medical term for socially inappropriate tics. And a lot of people seem to think that there's the one-to-one that coprolalia is Tourette's, when only about 1 in 10 people with Tourette's actually have coprolalia. And the thing about it is, it isn't somehow a Freudian slip. It isn't my unconscious desires suddenly spewing out through my lips. It's just the random neural energy that causes any sort of motor tic just hitting a different sound file, hitting a different animation clip, and it's just as okay as any other one. So yeah, so those are some of the notions that people have about Tourette's and coprolalia, and it really kind of came out. It really, really, I thought I'd have to go and look for specific examples of how that shows up in life. But actually, I heard this quote. It's up on the screen now. It was a guy. He was at work and he was having trouble being heard. And to get people to quiet down, he's like, "Have you got Tourette's or something? You know, you just sit there and babble, babble, babble." And while that might be expected if this guy was like in a dingy bar as a comedian trying to get people to quiet down, but it turns out this wasn't just anywhere. This was a workplace, not just any workplace. This was the Parliament of Australia. And this person wasn't just anybody. This guy was the Prime Minister of Australia. So I didn't have to do much work to show that really my feeling of how things are is really close to the grindstone. How easily he was able to just rattle this off kind of shows how often maybe he's been able to do it in the past and how far we have to go to show that Tourette's is a whole lot more than just this. And in addition to that, like I said, this is a workplace. 1 in 100 people have it. So very likely he was creating a hostile work environment for who knows how many people. And that is the next point I wanted to get into because it's something that's really near and dear to me. Like I said, I've had to do a lot of work to try to make workplaces a little better. And one last point I wanted to make is when you are a people leader, people will follow. When you say something like that, it creates room and gives people an excuse to recreate that same situation. And when you're a world leader, that's, exponentially more so. So what is it like actually to work with Tourette's? Well, it can be challenging, just like navigating the world in general. Um, so like environments are disabling, like the point I had there, and that goes back to my favorite definition of disability. Disability is a mismatch between someone's environment and their and themselves. If an environment is reactive and pushes people out, then that's where disability arises. And it isn't, again, just kind of a concept that's in my head. The 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 federal court case Ray versus Kroger in 2003 kind of cemented just how difficult it is to have Tourette's, especially coprolalia, and try to work. Because Charles Ray was dismissed from his job at Kroger because of the content of his tics. Customers were offended, they complained. He was pushed to the night shift, to the graveyard shift, to be as far away from people as possible, but people still complained. Even though they tried educating the customers, they still complained. And so they dismissed uh, Mr. Ray. He sued under the ADA and he lost. And the judge ruled he was too profoundly disabled to perform the core job functions of his job simply because he had coprolalia, even though the offense that was being generated could have been completely changed and it was based entirely in the ignorance of these people. That didn't matter. um so it can be difficult to try to work and anywhere with this disability. And so how do we make it better? I've done a little bit of work to try to educate people on how to create more inclusive working environments for people with Tourette's. My 5 tips, I have a link up on YouTube. If you just search for 5 tips for Tourette in the workplace, it will show up. But the main points I like to talk about are: first, tics wax and wane. They change. Just because somebody has one day and one not the next day doesn't mean that they're doing anything intentional. That's just the way things are. You can minimize distractions for people to make sure ticks aren't influenced by sudden changes in the environment. And my favorite thing is to be tick neutral in your interactions. So if you are familiar with someone and you hear them tick or see them tick, do what you can to just see through it and not react. Because again, that environmental feedback can influence people's tick expression. And simply just educate the team and people you might encounter to prevent the same situation that Mr. Ray had. And finally, like, anybody should be aware, and it should be obvious, ticks don't necessarily reflect the intent that I have. Uh, they 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 aren't at all reflective of what I intend to say or my values. They're just random noise. Um, and finally, yeah. So Tourette's in the media. You don't really have to go far to find pretty inaccurate representations of people like me. In fact, there's an entire study that I've linked to right here that says the portrayal of Tourette syndrome in film and television pretty clearly says what I'm already thinking. Tics depicted had a disproportionate representation on coprolalia. People love to hone in on the most explosive and controversial symptoms just to get a laugh instead of portray us accurately. And so, how can we, as makers of media, do better? How can we not only do it in a way that we can pat ourselves on the back and say good job, and it's not simply a way of um, virtue signaling, but this might actually make the lived experience of people with Tourette's a little better. So finally, all you have to do is one, don't make a toxic workplace like the Prime Minister of Australia. Make sure you accommodate your employees in the way that they need to. And most importantly, you can put twitchy people in your worlds and make sure that everybody else in that world welcomes them and doesn't react to them, acts as if it's completely natural, that of course they should be there. And if the player character dares to say anything negative, you can have everybody turn on them. You can pop up a everyone dislike that. You can have them say, what do you mean? Do you not have people like that in your worlds? Do you not, or do you just lock them up? Do you think that they're way too controversial to see the light of day? What a sad planet you must come from. So yeah, that's my talk. Thank you so much. That's Tourette's IRL, and have a great rest of your conference.